All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar here on the future of productivity. So we have a couple of guests. We have James and Glenn. Glenn and Kristen are here with me in our Nickel room in Toronto. And James, he's a senior solution architect at Amazon Web Services based in Ottawa. He's passionate about helping Canada's federal government use AWS to deliver services to Canadians. And he's a certified Amazon Culture of Innovator speaker. And I want to hear more about that and how you get certified. And we have Glenn. Glenn's an engineer and a global head of mining and minerals at Amazon Web Services. Glenn comes from Sydney, Australia, and has worked in mining for 3 decades. They always tell me never say that, just say 2 decades, because then you sound like you've got experience. 3, you sound old. But anyways, Australia, Indonesia, Chile, Canada, and the US, and he now resides in Denver, Colorado. He's focused on adoption of cloud computing with particular emphasis on industrial data learning and enterprise system integration. His expertise spans from working at several global mining companies like BHP, ABB, and Caterpillar, and he's excited about helping us drive change and transformation in the mining and minerals industry. So as usual, we invite the participants and the people in the audience to chat amongst themselves. We'll have a few presentations. I'll ask some questions. And Jan, who works with me at Sherrod, and Cheryl Hart, who works at OnTask, who helped me with these webinars. If they see something interesting developing in the chat room, they'll either break in or ask one of the speakers to answer some questions. And sometimes we'll ask someone in the audience to ask a question directly. So with that, we'll kick it off and pass it over. So we'll have 2 people. We'll have James and Glenn, and James will be going first.
Okay, we can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone for having me here today. My name is James Kiersted. I'm a solutions architect based here in Ottawa, Canada. So I've been with AWS for about 4.5 years. And in that time, I've been working with the federal government, helping them adopt cloud, so they could drive innovation and new ways to serve Canadians. So I will preface this by explaining that at Amazon, we know that there's many ways to innovate. We don't claim that ours is the best or the only approach to innovation or that it's perfect. So I'm always interested to hear what others are thinking and doing in this space. But we're happy to share the details about what we've adopted and the lessons that we've learned over the years. There are many viable ways or approaches that you can take to orient your business. You can focus on your competitors or invent new technologies or innovate around business models. There's many approaches, but what we've chosen to center our approach on is around obsessive customer focus. So we do hold ourselves accountable for demonstrating a customer-centric approach in everything we do. And one of the ways that we've done that is through our leadership principles. So we do have a total of 16 leadership principles, but I'll only be touching on 1 or 2 of those today. We also have a lot of mechanisms at Amazon. So these allow us to scale and help our leaders operate and innovate beyond their direct line of sight. And one of those hallmark mechanisms that we see here is to drive this customer-centric innovative thinking, and execution is the working backwards process. The outputs of this process is what we call the PRFAQ, or the press release frequently asked questions. Starting from the left, like the press release, it's a 1-page document. It's a narrative that describes the new product or service using customer-centric language. So with the press release, what we're trying to do is we're trying to leap into the future and imagine how a customer might feel about that product or service, what they may say about that idea. We undertake this exercise before we even start development or writing software. But limiting the press release just to the 1 page, what that allows us to do is to make sure that the thinking is crisp and that we describe the launch of this new product. In that press release, we communicate who the customer is, what the problem the customer is facing, describe the solution with the description of the most important customer benefit or benefits. We also include like a fictional quote from that customer that records the reaction to the new service or product. And this helps us put ourselves in the mind of the customer and think about how they would describe the benefits and value around the launch of the new product or service. The second part of the PR FAQ is the frequently asked questions. So there's two forms. There's the internal FAQ and the external FAQ. The internal FAQ is really those questions around, how are we going to price it? What's the market that we're targeting? Whereas the public FAQ, it'd be more from the customer point of view. What's the price and what happens if something goes wrong with it? So there's three parts to the FAQ that help us refine this idea and the customer problem it solves. One of our leadership principles is bias for action. So bias for action is, speed matters in business. Many of the decisions and actions that we take are reversible. So they don't necessarily require extensive study. One of the things that we value is calculated risk taking. So when you think about that, like how do we decide when it's appropriate to move quickly? The clue's in the description. It's whether it's reversible. So one helpful mechanism that we've developed is one-way versus two-way doors. One-way doors have significant and irrevocable consequences, and they require very deep analysis before we undertake them. So an example would be, deciding to build a fulfillment center or building a brand new AWS data center. Something very capital intensive like that, we dive very deep before we make that decision. But there's other types of decisions, and these are the majority decisions where they have very limited or reversible consequences. So an example might be trying some kind of tweak on the website. Very easy to back out of that and change direction if that doesn't work out for us. So we see that the two-way door, we have enough evidence and reason to believe that going through it would be a good idea. We just walk through it. Either way, we've learned valuable lessons from the exercise. We teach our leaders that they should, make decisions when they have 70% of the information. If you wait for you to do analysis paralysis and you wait until you have 90% of the information, you're just moving way too slow in the market. We also have this distinctly, Amazonian way of organizing people to optimize the execution. And that is what we call our two-pizza team, meaning that no team should be big enough that require more than two pizzas to feed them. Smaller teams help us minimize the need for matrixed communication or unnecessary meetings and bureaucracy, and it really helps us to accelerate the decision making. This concept is fundamentally around creating a little startup of around 5 or 10 people and providing them the right conditions and resources so that each team has ownership and autonomy. They have a deep single-threaded focus in one area. These decentralized and autonomous teams are empowered to develop and launch based on what they learn from their direct interactions with customers. But you also need to provide these teams with the right conditions and resources so that each team has that ownership and autonomy and a deep single-threaded focus in one area. So a two-pizza team also has the right resources embedded in them. And that would mean like that they would have the engineering, the testing, the product management, all of that would be encapsulated in that team. They have a very tight charter and a well-defined mission, and they also own the right KPIs for their business. The result of these decentralized autonomous teams are empowered to develop and launch based on what they learn from the interactions with the customers that are using their service. So two pizza teams isn't really about the size, it's as much about pushing the ownership and autonomy out to the edge. And as demand for the product and service grows, rather than expanding that team to more members, what we do is we split those teams into separate two pizza teams working on single-threaded sub areas. What this two pizza team model doesn't do for you though is guarantee success. But our attitude is that you can't have innovation without failure. They're really two sides of the same coin. If you're always going to succeed with experiments, then they're not really experiments. And you're not really learning anything from, by taking those chances. And Amazon has its share of failures. We had the failure of our auction market, not once, but twice. So we launched Amazon auctions in 1999. It didn't pan out, and later we launched Z Shops, which for a small fee, Amazon will let anybody set up a virtual store on Amazon to sell their products. But that idea didn't pan out either. But we kept at it. Remained stubborn on the vision, flexible on the details. We believed in the long-term value that the idea would attract both customers and sellers. But we remained flexible on the implementation, and we iterated based on what we learned through the exercise. Now, Amazon Marketplace is a significant part of the retail business. With last year, over half the paid units were being sold through third-party marketplace sellers. And we also have the Fulfillment by Amazon program that allows sellers to store their product in warehouses and make those products eligible for Prime shipping. And of course, we had the very public failure of the Fire Phone. We later ended up doing a $170 million write-down of unsold inventory. What we learned is that building hardware is hard, and yet many of the things that we had learned about building hardware and working with suppliers help us today in our devices business. Some of the people that had worked on the Fire Phone went on to work on early versions of the Echo and Alexa. So the message is you really need to have that culture. If you work on something that fails, it shouldn't be punished for that failure or forced out of the company. And is there any questions?
So I saw Jim put a link to the pizza roll in the chat room. So if people want to look that up, that's great. Cheryl, I've seen you eat 2 of those on your own. Does that mean you don't need any team members?
What did you say?
I've seen you eat 2 of those pizzas in one sitting. Does that mean
you
don't need
pizzas? Yeah, that's what I was asking. What's the size of the slices per team member? So it's actually a quite funny group we've got going on here. Everyone's saying, "What's the size of the pizza?" I guess, James, I was just going to ask. I think a lot of people are saying, yeah, fear of failure happens, but do you have an example or something like how do you process that? Like there's a fair bit of money you put into some of these processes. How do you reassure that people are safe in their jobs to keep advancing and having some failures?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the culture that you create, and I think we've done a pretty good. We've done very well in making sure that people feel that they're able to innovate and try new things. We have various mechanisms in place so that if you do have an idea, you can go off and create a narrative at that PRA FAQ that I talked about, and use that to advocate for your idea and try to build support for experimenting with it. But there's a recognition that if you are risk averse and you don't try new things, then you're going to miss those opportunities to bring new innovative products to the market. Nobody ever asks for a puck that you could talk to, that you could put on your countertop. Someone had to go off and imagine that, and then create the PRFAQ, and then really advocate for that. But those leadership principles that I talked about earlier, setting the right tone and expectation on everybody that's working in the organization is a big part in making people feel that they're safe, that they could experiment without fear of consequences if something doesn't work out.
I see, Ashish, if you want, just put your question in the chat, and then we can break it afterwards. I see some other good questions. I was wondering on the timing on the Fire Phone. I hope it wasn't at that time when all the plain phones kept exploding, because that would be a terrible marketing name. Glenn, are you about ready? We can pass it over to you and then break in with some other questions, unless unless you see something trending in the chat room.
Well, I was just going to say, actually, Nathan, you're surrounded by nice glass walls. One of the things that Sherritt's done is put an innovation room. So it's really cool, like being able to bounce that information off walls and almost feel protected, right? But you've done a great job on that over at Sherritt as well.
Yeah, we called it the incubator room. So that's where all the brilliant ideas get incubated. Maybe one day we'll have a session just on that. What do you think, Jan?
In Holland, an incubator room is filled with chickens.
Well, I know Andy Reynolds is chomping at the bit on this, so do we want to let Andy in now or later?
Andy, if you have some questions, go ahead.
Want to pop on?
Well, I guess one that I've put in the chat there is how do you stop the wheel from being reinvented? You know, if you have all of this distributed autonomy to teams to solve problems that they see, how do you stop it from looking like a Peanuts football game where all of the teams go to the same place and try and solve the same problem?
So that's actually a great question. And, there is a risk of that because with those autonomous teams, there could be some overlap. But the attitude is that sometimes that overlap is desirable as you're testing and trying out different ideas in the marketplace. Over time, you'll realize what works and doesn't work. And those single-threaded leaders, they do roll up in the organization. So at some point, you do have the opportunity to double down on one or another.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up question is, well, how do you share the learnings of that? How do you make the conclusions available so that others don't have to go and learn them again?
Yeah, just thinking through that, like most of the, there's different knowledge management platforms that we use, that we capture a lot of that information in that's available to the employees.
Okay, so thanks, Andy. James will stop sharing your screen and we'll switch over to Glenn's. He has some videos to show us as well.
Okay, thanks, Nathan.
Sarah, do you want to cue the video? Really cool one. I'm excited for this one. I've seen it and I love it.
Okay, how do I share my screen here? Share screen. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. So you should all be seeing a screen that says AWS Innovation in Action, correct?
Yep, we do.
Great. All right. Okay, so thanks, Nathan, and thanks everyone for taking the time to join us here today, and thanks for the opportunity, Nathan, to come and talk with the Bits and Bytes group. Just a little bit about myself and about AWS and what we're doing in the industry groups. And Nathan went through a little bit of my bio earlier in this session, but basically I've been in the mining industry for pretty much my whole life. I'm a mining engineer and originally from Australia. I now live in Denver, in Colorado. One of the questions we get a lot is, what's a mining engineer doing working at Amazon? It's kind of like the last thing that people expect. And we actually have a group at Amazon that's called our worldwide specialist organization. And in that group is where we house our industry vertical groups. And so we have an industry lead for each of the industries in which we operate. So some of those might be like oil and gas or manufacturing or agriculture. Could also be industries like, financial services, healthcare, media, entertainment, lots of different industries. And so I lead the group that is the mining and metals group. And our role in that worldwide specialist organization is really to bring that industry perspective to Amazon, to AWS, and to help our customers understand and determine ways in which they can use AWS to help improve productivity, improve efficiency, improve sustainability, basically just, create the environment from the collection of data and the processing of that data into information that can be used to increase customers' overall efficiency and improve their operations. And so that's kind of where I sit. And really a lot of what I do is really as the go-between between the technology part of AWS and the industry part of the mining industry. And so that's kind of why I'm at Amazon. So what we're going to do now is just talk a little bit about some case studies that I wanted to present. And we're going to take a slightly different perspective than what you might think here. We're going to talk about AWS innovation in action. So James has just walked through very quickly, some of, the ways that AWS structures itself to innovate. But what I'm going to do is talk about how some of these innovations actually have manifested themselves into different topics. But what you're not going to see here are are use cases specific to the mining industry. Just talking with Nathan and Cheryl earlier, we decided to go a slightly different perspective and look at other industries and look at ways that we can learn from other industries in terms of what happens in data and analytics and machine learning, and think about ways that we can learn from other industries and apply those techniques into the mining industry. So that's where we're going to go. And what I've got here is 2 or 3 videos. I've got 2 videos, and if we've got time, we'll do a third, that just talk about different use cases, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. So, okay, so let's kick off. So the first video I want to talk about, or the first case study, I'm sure it's one that you're all familiar with, which is Amazon.com. And we like to talk about this one because a lot of our customers are out there asking us all the time, right? How does Amazon.com work? How does AWS support Amazon.com? And what can we learn from that we can bring into the mining industry, or quite frankly, into any industry? So let me just kick off with a short video. It's about 1 minute. And these videos, by the way, have sound normally, but they're not going to have sound on this Zoom call. I will be providing the links to these videos later. The sound is very cool. So maybe when you get some time, you might want to revisit these and look at them yourselves. Okay, so let me just close a few things down here. Okay, so you should be seeing the Amazon fulfillment logo on a building. Can everyone see that? Okay, great. All right, so I'll just do a little bit of commentary as we go through this. So what you're seeing here is an Amazon fulfillment center. And what you're looking at here, is the video coming through clear? Okay. This is the robotics that we use in the fulfillment center to take items into inventory and to pick items out of inventory and send them to our customers. I'm not sure if you've seen this before. It's really quite amazing. We actually do public tours of our fulfillment centers. And if you haven't done one, you should go online and you can book at a local fulfillment center and go and see, what happens behind the scenes. And so what you'll notice here is that these robots are actually moving the shelves around in the warehouse. So in a typical warehouse, you think of having rows of shelves with people walking up and down the rows and picking different parts off of shelves. In the Amazon warehouse, it's the reverse. The shelves move around. We call them pods, and they move around and come to the what we call our picker, or it's our Amazon associate, who then takes the components off of the pods. And actually, what I wanted to do, let me just do this very quickly. I just want to show this video again. So again, you can see those pods moving around. You can see all the items in the pods. It's just going to go a little bit longer this time. I want to show what the end result is here. These are robots that are actually called Kiva robots, if anyone's interested. We have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these robots operating all over the world.
Someone made a very funny thing, Glenn. Someone said, can the Canada Post or US Post learn from this fulfillment center?
So let me just see where this is at. Yeah, so what you'll see now, we're coming up to about the minute mark. And so this is showing you the robots. But what you'll see here in a moment is the Amazon associate picking the items off of the pod and placing them into a bin. Okay, so here we go. So here you can see the associate, the pod comes in. It's all controlled by computer vision and machine learning. They pick the item off of the pod and they will place it into a bin. And as this is happening, there is computer visioning happening that's interpreting, where the part or where the item is coming from and where it's being placed. Here we have another view of some different robotics. This is actually the inbound logistics of items coming into a warehouse. Okay, I'm going to stop this video now. There's a lot that's happened.
Someone was asking if you could buy that robot on Amazon, and does one robot stick the other robot into the...
Unfortunately, no, those robots are not for sale on Amazon, but certainly it is it's kind of the backbone of of how we handle the supply chain and the logistics of getting items to our customers. And that's a good segue, Nathan. When you look at the Amazon business, we have over 200 of these fulfillment centers around the globe. Each fulfillment center, depending on the day, is moving about, could be as much as 1 million items, 1 million packages out to customers. Each fulfillment center itself carries several million items. And so you've got items coming in, you've got items going into inventory, then coming out of inventory, being packed and sent on to customers. And if you think about that, we're talking about hundreds of millions of items being delivered per day to our customers. And if you're a Prime customer, you're getting that in 2 days. And it's really quite a logistical feat, and the way that this works is not the traditional way that people think about warehouses. It's more to do with the machine learning and the analytics and the robotics and the automation and all of the processes that sit behind this that make this possible to get that kind of scale. And there's some other interesting facts here, right? You think about, you don't see it in this video, but there's typically 17 miles of conveyor belts in one of these fulfillment centers. Quite often when people are buying 2 things from Amazon, 2 different items, those components will come, or those items will come from 2 different fulfillment centers in 2 different parts of the country, but they will still land at your door in one box in 2 days, in amongst all these several million parcels being shipped around the country. So you think about it, it's just amazing how that works. And this is really the backbone of what happens with the Amazon.com online shopping. And this is all powered by AWS and our robotics capability. Any
awesome.
questions on any of this?
Actually, I think everybody's amazed here. Everybody's connecting, and I think the video, I don't think everybody's seen the video. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of these videos, so I think it's amazing to see how it's
I would have a question. I would have a question, Glenn. Does this mean that you are continuously optimizing your logistics pattern? Yeah, correct.
I mean, you can talk about this for a long time on this yarn. I mean, there's so much going on here. Like if you think about inventory reconciliation, typically in a warehouse, someone would walk around doing the reconciliation, counting the number of parts or the number of items. At Amazon, we do it's basically a continual, ongoing, real-time reconciliation. We are continually reconciling the goods that are going into inventory and out of inventory via computer vision to make sure that everything adds up. It's not very often that you would see something come to you that's got the wrong item in the box. We really aim for a very, very high quality bar in terms of getting the right goods to the people. And so when you look at, what we're doing here, it's not just about the technology, it's kind of revolutionizing the way you run a warehouse. So some of the things that, just in terms of the techniques that are behind the scenes here, obviously there's a lot of different sensors that are going on. The robots themselves are using, they use barcodes on the floor as well as computer vision and radar to help them navigate through the warehouse. There's all sorts of machine learning and artificial intelligence happening. So it's a continual learning process in terms of what's happening in that warehouse. The real amazing thing here is that in addition to what's happening in the warehouse, we're actually predicting what people will buy in the future. The only way that we can really achieve that 2-day turnaround, or in some cases 1 day, and ultimately we're striving for same-day delivery, is we've got to be able to predict what people are buying in the future before they buy it. So this is all about our forecasting algorithms, our simulations. It's a lot of IoT, computer vision, a lot of high performance compute, and extensive database technology that is really driving all of this.
And is this already in logging? Like, is this already in the mineral logging when you drill? Is any of that kind of AI technology connected in there yet that you're aware of?
So we have a number of partners that are using many of these same AWS services that are looking at how to improve the speed and accuracy and the whole process of logging drill core. And certainly that's one topic. I think that when we look at this, and this is what we talked about, Nathan, is we didn't really want to just go straight into a mining use case. We wanted to show something a bit different. And so, drilling and logging of drill core is just one use case. But really what I wanted to do here, and I can get back to you with more information on this. We're going to provide some links to these videos and some contact details. We're very happy to follow up with some discussion on any of this. But what you look at here is, you think about, some of the topics we've covered here: inbound logistics, receiving, stocking, but things like tracking and location and optimization. These are all types of things that we do in the mining industry in different ways, not just in the warehouse, right? A lot of what our customers are asking us is, well, Amazon's doing all this stuff in their warehouse. What techniques are you using that we can apply into the mining industry? So drill core logging might be one. Certainly the warehouse at a mine is another area. Of course, a warehouse at a mine site is not going to be anywhere near the scale of this, but there are parts of this that could be used in a warehouse. But my excitement about all this is really how this would apply to other things, like monitoring the material movement from rock in the ground through drill blast, load haul dump, through the crusher, through the processing plant onto the customer. Things like metal balancing. Yeah, sorry, Nathan.
Yeah, just jump in. I see there's really a lot of great questions going in the chat room. So what we usually do is we give our guests a copy of the chat room, and they're able to follow up with other people. And also, I should point out that on the website where you went to register, there's something called Ask the Expert. So if you don't get a chance today, or you're looking at this after the live viewing, feel free to use the Ask the Expert, and then we get back to Glenn and James with the questions, because obviously we won't have time to cover them all, but there's some really good stuff going on in the chat room.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. And we did have a quick poll. Cheryl, have we got time to just bring that up real quick?
For sure, we've had it. Laura's going to pull it up for us. It's and
while we're doing this,
opportunity to look at the innovation.
Yeah. So this poll here is you should be able to see it on your screen. So these are a lot of the different topics that we look at in terms of technology that could be used in mining to innovate and generate new possibilities around productivity improvement, sustainability, things like safety. I mean, there's a lot of different areas. So we're kind of curious to get your feedback in terms of where you think there might be opportunities from your side. Yeah, some good feedback here.
Right now, it looks like about a third on inventory and a high on automation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and so these are good topics, right? When we look at the industry, and we all know this, the industry on large is going through a transformation in itself. A lot of it was due to COVID, but we're starting to think about, how do we automate processes, get people off-site to remote locations or remote operating centers. Getting people off-site is going to improve sustainability and safety. There's a lot of different things going on. Robotics is a big area. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of emphasis, a lot of feedback from different OEMs about autonomous machinery. That's only one piece of automation, the way we look at it. There's all sorts of automation that can happen in the processing plant, in the warehouse. The value chain piece, this is the one I mentioned where, we're very interested at AWS in determining how to automate the process of tracking material through the value chain, doing things like the metal balancing and the production accounting, using things like computer vision to do stockpile volumes, to using computer vision to look at machine activity. Of course, some of the big data topics are around collecting data to use for maintenance and analytics. There's a lot of different areas that you could apply technology.
Actually, Glenn, I was just going to say that maybe because you showed an inventory warehouse style thing, I don't know if it had people deviate to there, but the lowest one I see in value chain, one of the supply chain issues is that we need to get production out, but the futures can tell us how much product minerals are going to be needed in certain areas. So if we were able to connect those into the supply chain, with what's being processed to what's needed at the end on the downstream through multiple sectors, that would be.
Yeah, and exactly, Cheryl. And these are all some of those, innovation topics, right? That it's like, if we could do this, we sometimes call this the art of the possible. But certainly there's a lot of technology that we can put into the whole topic of forecasting. And customers are doing this now. I mean, this is what happens in the whole area of metal price prediction, and what that means in terms of the demand, overall demand, price, and ultimately what that would mean for a customer in terms of being able to fulfill demand. There's a lot of opportunity. I want to make sure we leave enough time for the next one. Is there any other questions on this topic before we jump to the next case study? Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, more than happy to follow up with some questions after the fact. I know there's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot going on in people's minds here. So, all right,
That was great audience participation. We had like 3/4 of the people, and there's a few people like Cheryl and Jan and myself who can't vote. So probably had 80% of the audience taking part. So thanks to them. Thanks to you.
I was wondering why my clicks don't do anything.
Okay, let me just, I've just got to jump back to this screen here. Okay. Oh, hold on one second. Let me just go here. All right, so let's move on to another case study. Again, not from mining, but I'm sure something that people are familiar with, and it really sits in the area of sports. And we at AWS are doing a lot with integrating technology into different sports. In this case, we're going to talk a little bit about the Formula One racing. So, if you're interested in automobile racing, this might be an interesting video clip. But there's more than that. There's the NHL, there's the PGA, there's the NFL. There's a lot of different sports where AWS is actually empowering the fan experience. So like I mentioned, we're going to talk about Formula One, and you should be seeing a big red stoplight in the screen. All right, good. Again, this video clip is not going to have sound, but I would encourage you to go and watch this clip later with the sound. The sound is really, kind of what makes it a bit. It is a marketing video. And again, it'll be like the last one. I'm going to go through the video. It's just 40 seconds. And I just want you to watch what's happening. And then we're going to talk about what's really making this happen behind the scenes. It's a pretty wild clip, right? So you've got to sort of pay attention. And I'll comment a little bit as we go through this. And so what I'd like you to do, it's going to be a mixture of, what a fan would see in a Formula One race on the screen, on their TV screen, if you like, as well as different clips from the race itself. And you will notice as you go through this clip that there's all these dashboards that pop up on the sides of the screen. And so I want you to quickly pay attention to those if you can. And it's going to be a pretty quick clip here. So, all right, here we go. So you see these dashboards on the side. You'll see at the bottom there's a pit stop strategy. You've got the lap that the race car is at. You've got the cornering speed on the right hand side there. Now the car's in the pit. They're looking at tire strategy here. Again, on the left-hand side, incidents, what's happening back in the pit, cornering speed, car speed, lots of different data and information that's being fed back to the screen. It gets superimposed on the race itself. That's the end of that clip. Again, I'll send the link to you, and you should have a look at this a few times, actually. It's a great clip.
Thanks for the sounds there, Cheryl. That helped a lot. She was giving vroom vroom in the chat room there. People are always asking me, how do we get mining to be sexy? So I think if we turn the Kalgoorlie Super Pit into an F1 race, I think that might do it there.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, well, you picked a great example. Like my son, if I try to get him up before noon on the weekend, it's almost impossible. But if there's an F1 from Malaysia, and he has to get up at 6, no problem. So great example. But but I'm going to challenge the audience. People are always saying, "Oh, that's great for F1," or "That's great in an environment of inventory or a warehouse." But think outside the box. Like, how could these things be applied to mining? And I guess that'll be your point here.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if I could just tee it up a little bit, because we're going to ask you all again, how you would see the application of this. But just to tee this up, what you're seeing here is a Formula One race, which is obviously very different to, truck shovel fleet in a mine, especially the speed. But, the sort of information that comes back to the viewer here, and by the way, it's not just to the viewer, it's the same information that's going to the pit crew, except of course the pit view sees a different dashboard to the one we're seeing here, is things like, well, where is the race car, placed? What lap is it on? But also, where is it on the track? What's the speed of the car? What is the cornering speed of the car? When is the predicted pit stop? What's the status of the tires? What type of tires is the car actually racing on? And what is the strategy for the tires to make sure the tires are going to last through to the end of the race? It's actually got feedback on the safety car and different safety incidents that are happening and things that are happening in the pit. And when we look at all those sorts of topics there for a race, I would contend that a lot of those same topics exist in a truck shovel fleet, albeit in a different, frame of speed. And so, again, some of the technical concepts that we're looking at here, there's obviously a lot of data coming off of those machines that's being transmitted wirelessly to the pit crew, the location, all sorts of analytics, computer vision, real-time dashboards, a lot of simulation happening behind the scene. You think about it here, the objective is not just to get the car around the track, it's to win the race, which means, if you think about that, that's, well, how can I maximize the average speed of the car over the whole race? That's kind of what you're trying to do with a truck, right? But
in our context, we'd be looking at temperature of oil, temperature of brakes, temperature, not just position, but hundreds of different operating parameters.
Exactly, and those parameters. I mean, we're only seeing a small sample on this screen of what the pit crew sees. And it's interesting if you look at all these different examples with sports. It's really about how to improve the customer or the fan experience, the customer experience. But of course, the pit crew is looking at this from a different perspective. They're trying to win the race, right? And so, anyway, I think just going back to the learnings here, there's a lot happening here when you look at a Formula One race. And a typical fan that's watching this on the screen may not realize what's behind the scenes. What's happening here. But we did have another poll, and I wanted to ask Cheryl just to pop that one up on the Formula One. I've put a few topics in there for feedback. So Cheryl, can you pop that poll up?
Coming up.
Maybe I could ask you a question.
Yeah.
One question we get all the time is does this mean that AWS is now going to go into mining? So not just helping or a service to mining? Do you think that we'd ever see the day? And maybe not just AWS specifically. We get the question, does Tesla want to get access to the nickel, or Ford or whoever? So have you thought about this, or any comments?
Yeah, that's a good question. We get that question quite a lot. it's not an easy one to answer, right? I guess you would never say never. I'm not sure. I mean, from where I sit, what AWS is doing is looking at how we can help our customers improve their performance in mining. I'm not sure that we want to be in mining competing. If you look at what we're doing now, I guess if you look at Jeff Bezos, he's flying, rocket ships into space. So who knows? I mean, Amazon got into the grocery business with Whole Foods. There's a lot of different industries that we get into. So again, I would never say never, but I don't think so. I think the thing with electrification and battery electric, that puts a different spin on it, of course, because you look at Elon Musk has, mentioned that in the media. So who knows? But for now, and for the foreseeable future, what we want to do is help our customers maximize their performance and to improve the sustainability of mining in the industry. And so that's kind of what we're looking to do here.
Cheryl was the second poll launched.
Trying to get it. Laurie, do you have it available? You know what? Julius has a great question here.
Okay, go
Julius
ahead.
Julius, do you want to, are you okay to unmute?
Yeah, I can do that. Glenn, could you maybe discuss a little bit about the infrastructure and data management capabilities that you require for big data? In a previous life, I played a little bit in that. Yes. At a smallish organization in Edmonton. And one of the biggest obstacles we came across was, how do you get your data from your site yes. to your central data management facility? And then, what do you do with your data? How do you make it accessible to everybody in a format that everybody can use, those sorts of things?
Yeah, a great question, Julius. And that's a big question. So I'll just try to jump into this at a high level. And we get asked this a lot, is like, how do you get the data, right? So there's two aspects to that. Let me talk about that first. The first one is, how do you get the data from the machine to the mine office? And we've all been in this situation where, we talk about wireless networks and that type of thing at the site. We are at Amazon doing all sorts of different techniques, including things like private 5G, different ways of putting data communications on cloud to collect data, big data, real time, and get that into the AWS platform. If you look at, I think you've probably heard about Prime Day, which is the 2 days that Amazon goes and offers. It's like their main shopping day. The number of transactions that come into AWS during that time is billions of transactions. We're talking about an enormous number of transactions. We are no stranger to handling big data. The IoT sensors in one of those warehouses we looked at, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of sensors, right? At a mine, getting that data into AWS, that's going to require some technology capability, both in terms of hardware comms, but then also on the software side, the ability to absorb that data in a real-time fashion. There's a variety of different ways that we do that, Julius, and I probably can't get into them all now, but certainly we've got that piece covered. But there's a second piece I wanted to mention, and that is that a lot of mines are in remote locations, and people will ask, well, how does cloud work at, up in the Arctic Circle if I've got a diamond mine up there and there's limited connectivity? And so in those cases, we have what we call our hybrid edge technology, which is where we would actually install AWS hardware, computer hardware at your site to operate in a standalone disconnected mode. So in effect, what we're doing there is we're putting the AWS cloud services at your site, right at the edge, to collect that data and bring that into AWS. And then that edge location then integrates back with the cloud. So Julius, I know that's very high level. More than happy again to follow up on this, but does that help a bit? Does there any follow-up questions on that?
Thank you.
I see it's tracking about 50% reliability,
Yeah.
about a quarter haulage, and some safety and conditioning in there. Is that what you were expecting for?
Kind of. Yeah, I think the reliability angle is always the one people look at. I mean, and yeah, I mean, this is an area that is always one of the top areas. How do I increase the reliability and the availability of my equipment? You know, I think a best practice for availability on mobile equipment is in the low 90s, 92, 93%. If you can get to that in availability, there's a lot of mines out there that are in the 70s, right? And so there's some big gains that can be got there if you can just collect that data and use that to increase reliability and therefore availability. And we're doing this in a lot of different areas, a lot of different industries. It's one of our key focus areas for the mining industry.
Here's a question that could be for either you or James. I like this one here. So, and feel free to give away your secrets here. So what would be some of the greatest or most surprising partnerships that Amazon has developed, and why? So we saw, you know, the sports world, but anything come to mind, or James?
The one that I think about a lot is, you mean in mining, Nathan, or do you mean anyway? Yeah. Yeah,
just general partnerships that you.
Yeah, well, we have partners, and then we make acquisitions. So I mentioned Whole Foods. I'm sure everyone's heard of Whole Foods. And when we acquired Whole Foods, it was like, well, that's a little bit strange. Why is Amazon buying a grocery store, a grocery chain? But you know, the answer is because we're trying to revolutionize that industry. And there's a different clip, which is in the links that I'll leave with you all, that talks about Amazon's, what we call our just walk out technology. And I'm not sure if you've seen this, but basically we see that grocery shopping in the future, you walk into the grocery store, you'll pick your items and you will just leave and go home. And that using computer vision and other technology, we will figure out what people have taken and then charge them remotely. So that was one that sort of came up that was quite kind of interesting. I don't know if you saw the news. We just actually acquired a company called iRobot, which is the portable vacuum cleaner company. And, iRobot was, they've been working with AWS for many years. So I guess we're getting into the vacuum business. I think in the mining space, we have all sorts of partners that we work with, more partners than acquisitions per se, but, lots of system integrators, a lot of hardware components, OEMs, technology companies. A lot of the different technologies you're using today, whether it's geology, mine planning, fleet management, maintenance, ERP, all those different topics that you'd see in mining. Many of those different vendors that are out there are partners of Amazon. SAP is a great example of an Amazon partner putting SAP on AWS.
Well, James, you can jump in there, but also I was wondering, like, besides, your partners, do you hear of case studies where people contact you after the fact and say, oh, we've been using, your services for this, even though you weren't involved with them from the start?
That's a great question. And we do see a lot of our customers experimenting themselves. So in fact, some of and this is in the mining company space, some of the largest mining companies in the world have adopted the Amazon culture of innovation in terms of working backwards to innovate and come up with new ways to look at data. So we do see that. I think the industry as a whole, though, they're just on the start of their cloud journey. There's a lot of technology that gets into the mining industry today. We're seeing companies more and more so wanting to integrate technologies together, merge data sets together to get new insights. And so we see some of that, but we're expecting to see a lot more in the mining industry going forward, especially with the onset of COVID and getting people to be off working in remote locations.
Here, James, I'll ask you that. But before that, people not many people have dropped off, but I know at the bottom of the hour sometimes people do. So if people have other commitments, that's fine. But if you guys are okay, we'll keep going a bit. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So James, did you want to jump in with anything?
Sure. I mean, some of the relationships are complicated. I mean, we do have a marketplace service on our AWS platform where we have competitors and partners offer their products through that. And thinking about it, AWS itself grew out of Amazon, and of course Amazon continues to use AWS for its its cloud services. But we have competitors of Amazon that use the platform as well. So it's all about taking advantage of cloud computing, but differentiating on another basis.
There was a question, does AWS or Amazon invest in sensors, or do you just use what's on the market for let's say the F1 case, or if you see a need for a sensor that's not there and someone approaches you, do you invest in startups or small companies?
Yeah, the answer is yes. And in terms of, do we have our own sensors or do we partner with other companies that have sensors? The answer is yes and yes. So a good example and very applicable to the mining industry is that we have a sensor called a Monotron. Not sure if you've seen this. You can buy it from Amazon.com. And it is a hardware IoT sensor with a magnetic mount that you put onto a piece of rotating equipment, and it measures vibration, it measures heat, and it measures, I'm not sure if it's measuring noise, measuring a couple of things. It comes connected to an AWS gateway device that you basically plug into your network, all pre-configured, and you can immediately start collecting data from rotating equipment and sending that into the cloud where we run machine learning models to start to look for data discrepancies using different machine learning and different techniques. And so when you look at this is something that we're really trying to push into the mineral processing side, specifically in the processing plant. I think putting it onto a large haul truck, for example, is a bit of a stretch at the moment. That device may not last. It's a rugged device, but in the field, we would partner with other companies. So we have a lot of different partners we work with on IoT sensors and ruggedized onboard computers, ruggedized sensors that we can integrate with. But certainly the Monotron is something that everyone might want to have a look at. You can just go to Amazon.com and type in Monotron and it'll show you what that looks like.
Okay. Cheryl, Jan, anything trending that I've missed?
Dennis has a great question. I don't know if Dennis is still here. You want to ask your question? You want to unmute? So I know Jan was asking you questions about it.
Yeah, well, it's just related. So related to optimizing mineralogy being fed to the plant. And I mean, we do a lot of analysis. Obviously, there are probably other sensors that could be incorporated to collect more data. But is anybody using a system like that to collect data before you're even feeding or as you're mining to be able to optimize your processing?
Yeah, great question, Dennis. And yeah, the answer is yes. But I think this is an area that is still a work in progress, right? There's a number of different companies that are out there that have sensor technology to identify mineralogy and geometallurgy and other properties that may be necessary to do appropriate blending to feed the plant. But I think this is an area that's a bit untapped, right? We all know that we want to be able to measure the quantities of material being extracted from the ground and sent through the plant. But of course, as we all know, the main thing is, well, what is the grade? What is the geometallurgical characteristics? What are the impurities? All of that type of thing. It's certainly on our radar screen to work on that. It's one of the areas we're working on, but I would say that's more of a work in progress that's going to sort of evolve in stages. Integrating with things like LIMS systems is something we're looking to do as well, to basically feed into the metal balancing. It's a pretty big topic, Dennis, and very happy to talk about it, but it's probably a 30-minute discussion. It does raise one other good point, though, and I want to mention this, that our business at AWS is not to go and reinvent the wheel with technology companies that are out there offering sensors or other pieces of software. I guess we could, we could go and, for example, build some sort of a device to do some monitor or some metallurgical property detection from a piece of rock core, for example. But it's not really our business. And what we really want to do is work with those suppliers of technology that are already doing that to improve their products on AWS and be able to expose the data that they're collecting into other parts of the business. So I want to make it clear here that, we're not out, as AWS, we're looking to really be that partner for technology companies to improve their offerings into the industry, which would thereby improve the efficiency of the end user customer.
Just to piggyback on that, so there are companies like MindSense out of Vancouver that have sensors on shovels. So in our context, Sherrod's context, like it's not just the nickel grade. It's also, what's the acid consumers, because it might have nickel, but it might cost too much money to produce it. So if we're looking at nickel, grade is great, but we might want some of the alumina or some of the magnesium or magnesia, that consume acid. So we could follow up on that discussion at another time. But yeah, so combining a few different sensors besides just, is there enough copper or nickel in the ore to make it worthwhile? So.
Yeah, exactly. And look, there's a few companies out there I can mention. There's one called DataRock. There's one called CoreScan. There's Bort, which you would know, and of course there's MindSense. I mean, we're talking with all of these companies. Many of them are on AWS, like DataRock, who do interpretation of drill core. CoreScan is another one that's in that same space. MindSense is a little bit different because it's trying to do that in a more real-time way. Motion Metrics is another one that I'm sure you're familiar with. So there's a lot of different partners in the technology vendor space that are working on AWS and working with AWS to help improve their offerings in this space.
So we're getting close on time. So maybe I'll leave it back with you before I thank you for joining us. But James, Glenn, anything you want to leave with us in the mining area? Anything that, any last words you'd like to impart on us?
Well, look, again, thank you to everyone for joining, and Nathan and Cheryl and Jan, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Some of these topics that we've been, talking here in the last 30 minutes or so, they're big topics, right? And, I love talking about this stuff and exploring new ways to think about how to improve operations through the use of data collection and interpretation. It's hard to do in 30 minutes, but I'm in and around the mining industry. My role is to be customer and partner focused. Based in Denver, as I mentioned, but I'm spent a lot of time in Toronto and Vancouver and Calgary, and more than happy to follow up and have some deeper dive discussions. That's part of my role. So if you want to reach out to me, I'll leave you with Kristen's contact details, but I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me there. But yeah, I think we're very interested in hearing what the industry is wanting to do and where they see opportunities to improve. And the 2 polls that we ran were great, right? I think it gave us some good perspective, and some of it was expected. And it's good to see that we're sort of thinking, aligned. So. But yeah, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
And I'll give it to James, but I just saw a great comment come up from Samantha Espley, who I know from Sudbury, and Neha, they're from Sudbury as well. Samantha's comment was the wheels are turning, and I presume she meant in her mind as opposed to in the truck wheels. But so James, anything you'd like to mention to the crowd?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for having me today. And like I was saying in the presentation, that the key thing is the calculated risk taking. You have to be prepared to fail from time to time and learn from those. The lessons learned from those.
Yeah, I think that there's a big deep dive here, Nathan. I think we're actually going to have James and Glenn on again. There's just quite a diversity of questions. So, to summarize it, I really like that Glenn kind of stepped back and kind of explained the focus for AWS and Amazon overall. So, lots of questions on designing sensors and how to get the analytics. And I love the idea of, connecting in the LIN system, across our industry. Everybody's looking and using that stuff and always trying to look at ways to advance these tools that we have and make them more productive across multiple chains, not just in specific units. So on the metallurgy side, it would be awesome to see what's going on processing. And one of the things that came to my mind was about does it make a difference if you're doing these sensors and technology data in a specific community with specific mineralogy to get things going, like little things that you think about. Is it community focused? Is it is there certain ways that certain metals are going to be picked up faster with AI than other ones? The mind's definitely rolling, and things are going like Samantha said. Thank you.
Yeah, the chat room is very active and some great questions coming up. We'll leave you with a copy of them if you'd like to, follow up with some of them. A lot of the people on the call are regular, some new people as well. So first of all, thanks to Cheryl and Jan, partners in crime, in putting these together. Laurie and her group at Smarten Up Institute for providing us the platform. Kristen for joining us and setting this up, and of course Glenn and James for our speakers. So thank you everyone. Thanks to the audience. The hour and a bit really flew by from my side of the microphone, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks everyone.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
You.